Welcome to Tony at 12. I'm Tony LeBlanc, and today I'm in conversation with Bill Abel, Chairman of the States of Alderney Policy and Finance Committee. Bill, in fact, is our Chief Minister. Bill, thank you very much for sparing me some time.
Thanks, Tony. I'd hate to call myself a Chief Minister.
Well, I think you are number one in the pecking order, aren't you?
And not if you read the Government of Alderney Law 2004. I'm
okay.
Not in the pecking order. The president is number one.
Yes. Okay, you're the chief politician. Can we start off, Bill, by talking about the Civil Contingencies Authority? That's obviously the structure that's kept us going during the pandemic. And I just want to know how it eventually gets wound up. It's still live at the moment, isn't it?
It is. Just while I'm talking to you, I'd just like to remind you that there's a law inside, well, there's a regulation inside the law, which is 22.8, that says if I tell you something outside of what is in the public domain, I'm liable to a year imprisonment. So confidentiality is quite a trick. But coming back to your premise there, the Emergency Powers Bailiwick of Guernsey, I think 2012, defines the duties of the Civil Contingencies Authority. And basically it means there that in an emergency, the CCA is formed, which is where it's been now for, I suppose, a year and a half plus. And again, is there every single meeting, the law officers, Crown law officers are present, and they question two things. One is it still an emergency? And two, is it proportional? And that's part of the law. And again, you also have to realize that in terms of the World Health Organization, we are still in a pandemic situation. And hence, you can say on a world basis, it's a bit more of an emergency. Certainly, there have been discussions or questions raised by deputies in Guernsey with regard to whether the CCA should still be functioning. That discussion is ongoing, and I believe there may be something in the December deliberations in Guernsey that'll come up around that. And I think the important thing to understand is the CCA, through the law officers, is looking at what normally it passes across to public health or the Committee for Health and Social Care, which will now become part of its normal business. So those sort of things are continuing. Yeah,
okay. You confirm the renewal of it on a regular basis in the States of Alderney, don't you?
Yeah, not confirm the renewal. The CCA stands. It's not been renewed.
Okay.
What it is, you see there, that every month the regulations, which are out there in terms of isolation, vaccines, travel restrictions, security issues, population management, they come up monthly for review.
Yeah.
And because the law says they cannot be in place for more than 30 days before they're renewed and reissued and approved. And so that comes up every month or the maximum of 30 days, but obviously amendments come up as well. But again, they're passed by the CCA, checked by the Crown law officers, and then basically come into force immediately. And then we in terms of the law, don't annul them, or not to annul is the normal vote in the States.
Yeah, but eventually, presumably, when everyone's happy that the pandemic has passed or is controllable, the powers just lapse, do they?
Yeah, I think it's a bit more formal than just sort of lapse and all go home and have a cup of tea. There's a process, I think, to follow at that point.
Yeah.
And basically, the question would be, are we still in a situation as defined as an emergency? And there's definitions of that. And the second one is there a possibility of emergency occurring each time? Yeah. And obviously, there's a balancing trick against, is there another sneaky variant of COVID or something else coming up? that may need the CCA to continue to operate for a period.
Okay.
Those decisions are reviewed every single meeting.
Yeah, that's useful, Bill. Thank you very much for that. Let's have a look at the 2022 States of Alderney budget. The highlights, obviously from that point of view, you've had a windfall in terms of the property sales, which has created a surplus. How about the rest of the budget? Have you got enough money coming in to cover the Alderney costs?
Yeah, certainly if you look at the financials that were put on the table at the recent States meeting, it shows that we can cover it. Our budgets are very much in line with previous years. The island doesn't really change significantly. And again, is the impact of inflation, fortunately at the moment, is not huge. And I think we have a reasonably good budget going forward. You'll see if you look there, our total costs are in the region of 3.6, 3.7 million a year. And when I look back, I think 10 years, when I entered this, the position of States member, just to have a look, it actually doesn't vary that much other than by inflation.
Yeah.
We still have the same duties to do, and we have the same structure normally in place to manage it. And as you say, the windfall comes around. We've been fortunate on the property or document duty and congee.
Yeah, yeah. But that is very much a one-off, isn't it? We can't expect those sort of sales to continue because the housing market has been pretty stagnant since 2007, and it's taken a long time to show any signs of recovery. This obviously enables you to get some infrastructure projects underway. I believe the sewerage scheme on Platte Saline and things like that are now going to happen. Is that correct?
Well, certainly we're closer down the road than we were. There's a bit more focus on it, Tony, but it's going to take a little bit of a while to really get the optimum solution. Shall I say, we've been going around in circles for quite a while on that one.
So you're not thinking necessarily of dumping raw sewage into the sea?
No, well, we do at the moment, as
yes.
You're more than well aware.
Yeah.
And no, we have to look at, shall I say, an intermediate solution to minimize that, and then also maybe look at a longer term solution and try and figure out one of the biggest challenges you have is during a flood situation that the facility you build will be overwhelmed. And I think that's a similar problem when you listen to all of the discussions in the UK at the current time. So that whole situation has to be reviewed.
Yeah, okay. The harbour deficit, 136,000, presumably that was caused partly by the pandemic and lack of visiting yachts.
Well, not partly, it's mainly that, plus obviously some of the services we offered for free. If you want to attract people to come here and spend money that we obviously don't see as the States as part of our earnings, hopefully the hotels and restaurants, etc., benefit from that. And it's probably not hopefully. We know that it actually did help, and it helped a positive attitude with the rest of the bailiwick to do that.
So you see a situation where that deficit could be reversed in future years. It's just purely and simply a matter of timing.
Well, I think, and I was going to go back a while, that's not a deficit that totally gets eradicated, because there's a limit to how much you want to charge people, as they won't come there.
Yeah.
So it's a bit of balancing, but certainly it'll get reduced. When I look at previous years, where am I there? Yeah, it's a little less, but not so hugely so, so to speak.
Now, whilst we're at the harbour, it's noted that the Guernsey boat gets in late virtually every Wednesday. And, they're still unloading 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock at night. Who pays for the overtime there, Bill? Because part of it is Alderney, isn't it? The States of Alderney crane driver, and presumably ancillary staff have to be paid.
Yeah, absolutely. And really there is, unfortunately the cycle is there. And we have to rely on Channel Island stroke I'm trying to think what it's called, Channel Island Seaways, as well as
Alderney ship wearing its label of Alderney shipping at that point. Yeah,
to do that. And again, if we get upper deep, it'll come back and bite us.
But having said that,
balancing trick.
But you have a contract with them, don't you?
Correct.
Does that not state that they have to come in at certain times or anything?
It probably does. I would like to say that it's been high on my list to read, and certainly it's with GSC. And it's certainly, shall I say, some discussions coming up when it's due for renewal.
Okay. We'll skip the staff pension deficit because we've had this conversation before, and I think virtually every local authority in the UK has this elephant in the room that will eventually bite, but there we are. Bill, if you have a shortfall on the revenue, will Guernsey come in with further support?
Why would you think they would do?
Well, you know, they used to effectively, when they collected all the taxes, the TRP and the excise duties, etc., they effectively gave the money back, but quite often they gave back a bit more, didn't they?
Yeah, that's true. But again, there is, let's say, with some of the decisions or pushes from previous members some years ago, that Alderney had access to its own revenues. That has now changed the relationship, that Alderney now wishes to fund itself. So that's where we are at the moment. We were very fortunate last year to receive a £300,000 top up, if you want, to our own budget last year. And that has been passed through into reserves this year, obviously for future. But again, it's really unlikely that we would get support from Guernsey again. And again, as you well know, and it's an item later on, there's been much discussion about the 2 million paid for Aurigny as the PSO.
Yeah, we'll come on to that later, as you say. But as far as Alderney is concerned, the one thing it's missing at the moment is the duty on alcohol and tobacco. Guernsey still retains that. Is that correct?
I've not really had a good look at it. I'll have a look at that, Tony. And certainly that is something that, shall I say, we'll have a stretch for to get a portion of that.
I mean, I think the reason that it couldn't be passed across to Alderney was the fact that you would have to have a bonded store and staff, etc., to make it work. And I mean, I would have thought there was quite a bit of potential revenue there, particularly on alcohol.
Yeah, let me have a look. See, it's not something I've asked the question on.
Yeah,
but again, I don't think it's necessarily, shall I say, the bonding, because we don't normally handle those sort of things. Those are handled by border agency come tax type people. And again, it's whether those collections can be round trip back to us. So we'll have a look at that.
Okay. Now, in one of the Alderney periodicals recently, there's the term legacy issues that have to be resolved. Are you able to give us a bit more information on that?
We've got a couple of days.
Well, 5 minutes or less, please.
No chance. When I came in there, I knew there were 1 or 2 crocodiles. What I hadn't realized was how many swamps were full of crocodiles. Okay, and when I look back over the years, there've been a number of issues that should have been dealt with and need to be dealt with. You addressing 1 or 2 of those, like early years type care, nurseries, housing, sheltered housing. The Connaught will be full before we finish building it. You have a lot of items around the island. The nunnery was one that's come and bit us. The sewage plant, if you want, should have been progressed some while ago. The whole thing around the International Holocaust Remembrance Association are there. And there's umpteen of these as you dig in the woodwork that require a hell of a lot of time to advance, and it gets in the way of trying to go forward. And in fact, the new chief executive has really had a fill of these type of issues, plus people raising complaints, both realistic and unrealistic. She has to deal with those in terms of the code.
Yeah.
So it's those sort of things that's slowing us down and requiring us to spend more time than we had planned to.
Okay, that'll do, Bill. Coming on to aviation, the public service obligation, you're obviously pleased to see that completed and sorted out. You're happy with the terms of it?
Well, to put it this way, we don't know what the terms are. It's not our PSO. The PSO is between Guernsey STSB, well, in fact, with PNR, the STSB, the state's advisory board on the Guernsey side, and Aurigny. So we're really on the peripherals. And two bits that have come out of that is, one is the service level, which is what we're looking for. And the second one, obviously, which is outside the nominal PSO, but an agreement with PNR in Guernsey to subsidise Aurigny to the extent of 2 million per year on the Alderney services and the Dornier service, if you want to call it that.
Yeah.
So we're fortunate that that has now been agreed, and that is continuing and is supported by the states of deliberation over the next 5 years. But beyond that, Tony, we obviously still have much to do. That is not resolved, and potentially the lengthening runway and the use of ATRs, hopefully, I say, but again, Aurigny feels that that's the case, but hopefully from our side, will mean that we don't need extra financing beyond the 5-year period when the Dorniers are fly into the sunset or other places.
You're pro the idea of lengthening the runway, yes?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, multiple reasons of that. One, obviously, if we can, excuse me. One is that if we can get the runway lengthened, not only will it allow the ATRs come in, but it also opens up other means of flying in.
Medivacs.
Medivacs is the key to that. Yeah. So yes, we're supportive of that totally. Plus also that runway needs overhauling. It is not doing well.
Now, who pays for it?
The moment there, the states of deliberation have voted £12.2 million. So it comes out of Guernsey.
Yeah.
When it comes to the lengthened runway, in other words, beyond the 888 meters we're on, to take it to 1050 or 1100, I don't know what the final number is for the ATRs, that number has still got to be tabled. And again, that has to be debated in the bailiwick, states deliberation, and then we'll see what happens. Certainly that may have to be financed, and as it's a 30-50 year project, it would make sense.
Yeah.
We're hopeful that Guernsey will look kindly on us again still, but again, is Guernsey, as you know, under pressure.
Now, the problem that a lot of people over here have, if you've got a plane coming in that can carry, well, up to 70 people, but probably realistically 50 on the sort of length of runway that we're talking about, how will that cut the service? How many a day will we get to Guernsey? How many a day will we get to Southampton? Can people go down in the morning for a medical appointment and get back at night? These are the sort of questions that are being asked.
In terms of Guernsey, that is in the link between here and Guernsey, that will be met in terms of the ATRs. In terms of the Alderney and Southampton, there is only likely to be, on an ongoing basis, a single flight per day. They have reviewed their own information, and less than 5% of people going to Southampton come back in the same day. So to justify an ATR for 2 people is not going to happen.
You see,
realistically.
This, as I say, is you know, the difficult part of the whole equation, because Aurigny obviously want to try and go on to a single type of aircraft. We can understand the reason for that. I think most people would just take the view that if there's a daily flight to Southampton, so be it. I mean, you know, you don't go along to British Airways and say, oh, you know, you've got one going every half hour to so-and-so. You know, you have to accept what they say about it. But I do think that this question of getting people down and back in the day for medicals is important. We don't want people to have to go in the evening and pay to stay overnight in hotels or anything like that.
No, and that's certainly, in terms of the Guernsey leg, that's a key part of it. So there will be flights in the morning and flights in the evening, to pick up people. And then any extended visits to the hospitals in Southampton or wherever they end up in that obviously is a different discussion, and compensation will have to be considered.
Yeah, but you're fairly positive about this question about lengthening the runway. You think that it will, in all probability, come off?
I think so, Tony. And realistically, if for some unknown reason, shall I say, it doesn't, and they say they'll only refurbish the 888, then I think the States of Alderney really has to consider what makes sense for Alderney in terms of future-proofing ourselves and also Medivac type services.
Yeah.
So I think we may have to go and find a piggy bank somewhere and mash it with a big hammer, because I think that lengthening to at least 1,000 meters is the only way to future-proof us going forward.
Yeah, and I think that's important because we rely on the airline, don't we? It's as simple as that.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, it's all very well about talking about ferries to Guernsey and this sort of thing, but whilst it works reasonably well in the summer, in the winter, I wouldn't want to go to Guernsey on a smallish boat being tossed all the way.
It's challenging, certainly.
Yeah. Okay, let's get on to the energy policy. Obviously, there are not going to be any subsidies to the population, to the house owners, in terms of putting in heat pumps or doing anything else, insulation, etc., etc. How do you see our energy policy progressing?
I think where we stand at the moment, Tony, obviously the simple one is to increase the levels of insulation required on new builds. I think I remember what they said, 2025, I think, is the next time.
Yeah.
So that we'll have a look at, which is a simple one and benefits the owner in the end. With regard to going back and providing a subsidy for people to insulate their own homes, that's a difficult one, because as you're more than well aware, we haven't got many piggy banks and there are not many in it.
That's right.
So really, it's really to encourage people who are probably the larger homeowners and hence the more who use the most energy, they should be having a look in their pocket and helping themselves in that area. So that's where it is. So that would be the simple one, insulation going forward. The next one obviously is looking towards more large arrays in terms of solar, which I believe is economic. And now that the power plant or the power station down the hill and its automation is just about complete, it then gives Alderney Electricity now the time to start looking at that next step in terms of where we can link into renewables and how we do that. So that's the next step, I think, is to look towards solar. We'll look at wind options. The biggest thing to be really economic on the wind option, you want to be looking at a wind turbine that probably stands 1.5 times the height of the island.
Yeah.
To go to lots of small ones, we're going to look at it, but I'm not too sure of the practicalities of that and also the economics of that. And that's part of the work we're now doing as part of the Energy Group's mandate. And then obviously we're still trying to look at how we can leverage our tidal resources. And we're obviously going to watch over the fence at what is happening on the other side of Ras de Blanchard, on the French side, with how CIMIC Atlantis gets on. Plus also we have links into the Tiger project, which is the tidal industrial energizer initiative from the UK and the EU to push tidal resources to try and bring them to 1 gigawatt so that they're sustainable. So that's the sort of areas we're going. But the other thing too is that as the world, I suppose it would be, moves towards hydrogen use, then that is an area we believe we must have a look at as a simple, whether it's going to be an expensive, I don't know, option, but utilizing hydrogen in a hydrogen engine at the power station, for example, which is possible, but the technology is not quite there. Whether we can, if we have surplus renewables energy certain times of the day, whether we can produce hydrogen from that, and then literally either pipe it to local housing or actually put it in a little tiny tanker, take it up the hill and put it in your hydrogen tank at the back of your house to move towards replacing heating oil, because heating oil is probably a bigger challenge than the diesel we burn at the power station.
Yeah.
In terms of, well, it's 2 million litres of diesel per year for the power station and 2 million of heating oil. But to replace heating oil is not that simple, because you have to look at the boiler. If you're going to go all electric, you'd have to have electric boiler. We would have to beef up the infrastructure probably by 3 or 4 times. And I don't think we can realistically afford that going forward. So the use of gas in some way, particularly hydrogen, is an option we're starting to consider. And in the old days, which I hadn't realized, and Nick Haynes pointed it out, the old coal gas, and I'd never realized that they produced from burning coal here on the island back in the, I don't know how far back it was.
Yeah.
That
Pre-war.
was something like, that was 40 or 50% hydrogen content.
Yeah.
Which I hadn't realized. So the ability to burn hydrogen standalone is there. And again, as I know, companies like Bosch and various other appliance suppliers have been pushed to develop that technology that allows engines or washing machines or whatever you can burn hydrogen in to have a look at that development.
Quite interesting over the weekend that JCB announced the fact that they're taking a 10% stake in an Australian hydrogen company. And also JCB have developed a variant on their diesel engine, which will run on hydrogen. And, you know, the point they were making was it's all very well to have a battery excavator, but when it runs out of power at 12 o'clock, you know, you're fiddling around for another 2 or 3 hours to charge the thing up. So, you know, the internal combustion is still important. The internal combustion engine is still important.
I think so. And I mean, we had a project I was working in Australia. We degassing the mine, which was direct coal gas, mostly methane from the mine. We powered 32 megawatts of surface generators, which were all diesel engines converted to burn on gas.
Yeah.
Not quite so efficient, but it utilized the gas so we didn't flare it, and B is obviously produced electricity. So I'm more than hopeful they'll get the solution for that. The big thing with burning hydrogen is with the temperatures it burns at, as I understand it, it starts to make NOxes. It adds nitrogen and oxygen together, not just hydrogen and oxygen. So you can end up with some other horrids.
Yeah, that's the problem, I suppose, from that point of view. Okay, let's just conclude the energy policy by saying, presumably you as the states have to come up with the ideas and Alderney Electricity then have to implement them. You know, it's a political decision and a political exercise, isn't it?
It is indeed. Obviously, if Alderney Electricity come up with some bright ideas, we're not going to turn them down.
No.
And at the moment, the energy group consists of 3 states members, 1 representative from Alderney Electricity, and 2 non-states members who have got interest in that area and can contribute. So we're trying to get a balanced approach. And as you rightly say, once we get a view of the way forward, the states will discuss with AEL how that is rolled out and done.
Yeah, okay. Changing the subject totally, recent point that has cropped up is this question of childcare and the fact that we are losing young couples who, you know, just can't get childcare, or if they can, they can't get it at an appropriate cost. What can the states do about that? Back to your piggy bank.
Well, there's that. But again, it's one of these legacy issues. We have got childcare in some form down at the school between, I think, 3 and 5.
Yeah.
We've got some run by another little group out of the Island Hall, and they deal with, I think, also a bit of a longer mix between 2 and 5. And then you've now got another lady, as I understand it, I'm not on top of that one, who's just bought something at Breakfields, and they can provide nursery services up there. Plus, there's a little bit of daycare across in the Butte Centre.
Yeah.
And again, it's part of what we have to look at and how we can try and get people together.
Yeah.
And see how we can resolve. Off the top of my head, there's no obvious solution at the current time. And really there's a need for it. And you can see that the one lady who's now up at Breakfields, she sees an opportunity. So we would support whatever happens with people who want to develop businesses in that area.
Sure.
But again, I think it's a bit bigger than just individuals, because I think the whole provision of care at the moment needs to be integrated and welded together.
Talking about younger families, Bill, we also got this question of assistance for first-time house buyers. Once again, you know, if you throw money at it, generally speaking, the market then takes off and you don't achieve anything. Classic example being this question of stamp duty in the UK. That was reduced during the COVID pandemic and property prices went through the roof. So it's a very difficult one to look at. Now, I'm just wondering whether, for example, you consider doing a Banquage 2 project on the site going along from the existing Banquage towards Battery Quarry. Do you know what happened there?
What do you mean, the old Banquage?
Yeah.
Yes, no, I'm mostly familiar around it.
Yeah.
And as I say, but really where that stands at the moment, the housing group has been formed and it has its mandate. It's led by Rhys Jenkins, and it has obviously Boyd Kelly on it and Ian Carter and Kevin Gentle on that group. And they are charged with looking at all of these options. And again, looking at states' assets, which are deteriorating, and I hate to say it, something like Whitegate is in their pot to look at.
Yeah.
You know, so really until that group has looked at those options, also converse with Guernsey, who have a similar problem, and they're actually bringing in prefabbed houses almost. You know, until that group has completes some of its initial assessments and comes up with a recommendation, there's a whole pot full of options. And again, funding becomes the challenge.
But we're agreed that your main asset is the land that the states own, which could be used for development.
Absolutely.
Rather than chucking taxpayers' money at it.
No, not really. Yeah, well, I think you may have to look at some of that. Do we extend the AHA's basket of houses?
Yeah, yeah.
Do we look at special ways of helping first-time buyers, particularly, shall I say, in the lower income groups, I suppose, with the word. So that whole sort of situation has to look at. As you say, as the housing market's already taken off, So lighting another blue touch paper will
Yes.
just make it
Yeah.
go up high.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's almost you issue a piece of land and it's up to you to build on it.
Yeah, because the fact of the matter is you can't beat the market, can you?
No.
You know, it either goes up or it goes down, but when it's going up, it gets fired up very easily with various, financial concessions made by government. Let's get on to the marina. Where are we on that in terms of negotiations?
At the current time, we're still exchanging letters with Bray Harbour Development. We're still after a certain amount of information from Bray Harbour Development, and that is ongoing at current time.
So the ball, excuse me, the ball is in their court, not in the state's court.
It's at the moment in the state's court because they lobbed a letter over the fence a couple of weeks ago. So we're going through that and we'll determine what is our next stroke that we will play in this tennis game. But we're hopeful that it'll progress. And again, the key is understanding the business plan and the economics, and also what it means in terms of the impact on the island, in terms of any housing units that need to be built to fund it. And that is, I think, going to be the big challenge.
Well, I think that has always been the big challenge because it's been going on for about 40 odd years or something like that. But equally, you sometimes have to say to yourself, well, we've got to make concessions because having a marina will buck up the economy no end.
Yeah, I think it will while it's there. And I mean, the other thing too, if the marina is built in that side against Fort Albert there, it will change the nature of the island. And that may be very difficult for people because potentially the whole of the harbour area will move to the other side. And that's quite a big step. But again, it's not clear what it's going to look like in the long term.
But, progress is all about doing things like this, isn't it, really? If we don't do something fairly radical, we're just going to end up like a little island with an old folks' home, representing you, me, and everyone else of our age.
Well, that's a possibility, Tony.
We hope not. What about Fort Torgey? What's happening there?
Nothing.
Right. So does that...
As I said, there's so many issues to deal with.
Yeah.
It's low down on the priority list. And at the moment there, the CE has been told to put it into a bottom drawer and plus at the current time. But again, it's something we haven't forgotten. And as the whole discussion around the airport lengthening comes up, there may be other options for that.
Are the Dutch people still involved in it, Bill, or have they walked away from it?
I can't tell you.
Okay, right. Let's get on to the swimming pool. You've got all this money as a result of Congy. How about finishing that off and giving the children something that's real legacy stuff? The man that sorted the swimming pool.
Hopefully I don't drown in it. It never gets water. It certainly is a key thrust of the States.
Yeah.
What has slowed it down again is that the Sports Foundation has become involved, and it's a good involvement, so don't get me wrong with that. Their input's been invaluable through Simon Brazier and groups across there. And basically what it is, they are looked at putting together a sports centre come swimming pool in and around the school. So it's really trying to put that whole package together, discuss it more with the Education Committee, because it's already been discussed with the Education Committee and they're minded to accept something like that when the final study comes out. And then basically it's a question of probably discussing with PNR in Guernsey some financing for that, plus also the states here looking at providing some financing for that. And we are hopeful that in the next week or two, we'll get that final study which the Sports Foundation's put together. I spoke to Millie Dudley Owen a couple of weeks ago, just to see where her thinking is, and she's also waiting for that. And certainly Mark Hillier's in the picture.
Right.
So we've got the starting blocks. We're a bit short of the horses and possibly a few old horses here.
But you've got the basic structure there. It shouldn't be too difficult to finish it off, I wouldn't have thought, apart from the money, in terms of just the swimming pool.
Theoretically, you're correct.
Right.
It's the money.
Yeah.
And not only the money, but the ongoing operating cost.
Yeah, sure. Well, I mean, that's always been an issue. And, you know, in many ways, it's a shame that it's got to this point that it's got to. You know, it's sort of lots of people full of goodwill trying to sort it, but, you know, just sort of disappears in a morass, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, unfortunately, those things happen. Plus also aspirations and budget, unfortunately, don't tie up.
No.
And you know, optimism doesn't fund ongoing costs.
No, couldn't agree more. Finally, World War II Memorial Questionnaire. When's that going to be issued? I thought that's supposed to be issued in October.
Yeah, we've obviously put out the island plan, so we don't want to put too many of these, what I call rubber monkeys or survey monkeys out, and it is due to go out shortly, Tony.
Right, okay, that's fine.
Again, there's one of those things. For 75 years, okay, we haven't progressed, and suddenly our friends from the Holocaust group in the UK with Lord Pickles and his sort of team around him with the AHRA suddenly want to move everything forward in a week.
Yeah.
And that has been a little problematic, shall I say.
Yeah, okay, enough said. Finally, the employment law. Is that going through, or what's happening on that?
The current version of it, what do we call it, has actually gone through to the Queen.
Right.
She signed it off. So it's Alderney Conditions of Employment Law, and that, I think, becomes due to be formalised on the 15th of December.
Right, okay.
Okay, and that is it's a very simple system which allows an employee to ask for a written document. It is not a contract of employment, it's just information.
Yeah, okay.
Clarity. Whether that employee will get a document in our current business climate, shall I say, will be interesting. But again, it's just a basic framework. We have to advance the next two bits of legislation, which I feel are proper contract law, and the second one is minimum pay. Okay, so essentially it's a three-stage effort, and you've just got the first bit underway. That's correct there, and really the next two are the real, shall I say, the key ones. The challenging ones. The challenging ones. Yes, that's right. Minimum pay, I think quite a lot of people already do minimum pay. Yeah. So maybe that one's not so challenging, but obviously there'll be pushback on that. But obviously a contract of employment will be seriously beyond challenging, I suspect, based on the current tradition, shall I say, on the island. Okay. Right. Well, on that basis, Bill, I think the time has come to say thank you very much for sparing me some of your time today. Really enjoyed having a chat about things, and possibly early next year. Yeah, if we're all still about and the world hasn't come to an end, and COP26 has not suddenly grown trees all over the island over the weekend. Anyway, really grateful for your time. Thank you so much. Thanks, Danny. Good to talk to you.